blowing snow and also the wind chill.
Local forecast. This is WeatherScope.
Tornado damage in Haines City, Florida. Residents say they heard the twister rumble through the area around 4 this morning. Damage is widespread and many homes were ripped to shreds. Florida is very wet after a very active day, and now many people are dealing not only with the flooding but also with the tornado damage. Welcome to WeatherScope. I'm Terry Smith.
And I'm Christina Abernathy. I'll take a look at the western half of the country. There's snow falling and a lot of wind.
But first, the people in Osceola County, Florida are picking up the pieces after being hit hard by a tornado early this morning. Firefighters in the city of St. Cloud are clearing down tree limbs and power lines, and several homes and trailers were also damaged. Other areas of central Florida are dealing with the problem of flooding. Heavy rains inundated the city of Clearwater over the last few days. More rain fell today, and homeowners just watched their belongings being ruined as their homes sit in several feet of water. If you do live in this area, be aware that some of the flooded streets are going to be difficult to navigate because you really can't tell just how deep that water is. Well, the thing to keep in mind is the rain is ending, and that's good news for Florida. But that storm system still affecting parts of the east and mainly in the form of snow, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the rainfall we have seen so far this month really is incredible. Typically through this date, which is the 27th of December, Tampa and Orlando and Jacksonville, maybe 2 to 3 inches of rain. That's the average, but we've well exceeded that. Almost 15.5 inches of rainfall has occurred thus far in Tampa. Now, our front has moved on out. The flash flood watches have been dropped, but the flood warnings are still out for many of the rivers and creeks in west central and southwestern Florida. So just stay alert if you live in these areas, because we've seen some places as much as 5 inches of additional rainfall today. So those creeks and rivers are going to continue to rise for a while. Again, the good news is the dry air is starting to filter in across the Sunshine State. And if you're vacationing there or living there, finally we'll get a break from this wet weather. But notice that just to the north we have rain in South Carolina, snow on North Carolina, and it's the same storm system that brought the rain to Florida that's been bringing the snow into the western areas of North Carolina and on into Tennessee and now up into Pennsylvania. The heavier snows have been accumulating in the mountains, the Appalachian regions. In fact, around Bluefield, West Virginia, we had reports of about 7 inches of snowfall so far. But some of those northern and western suburbs in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, you're going to be looking at a couple of inches of accumulation, perhaps 2 to 4 inches. There's our area of low pressure just off the coast. It's pulling in some colder air in addition to the moisture, and that's why we're actually seeing snow all the way down to the Cape. So we've got all sorts of winter weather advisories out for Boston, the D.C. area, also Baltimore. and winter storm warnings down around the Cape and also Rhode Island. So keep that in mind. Now, our temperatures are just above freezing in many of the city locations. Outer suburbs obviously will be a little bit cooler than what we're seeing being reported here, and the temperatures tonight will probably hover right around freezing or maybe even drop a little bit below freezing. We've got some ice pellets and sleet being reported with some of the rain mixing in around Norfolk. Snow in Richmond, snow in Manassas, and also into Wheaton and Rockville. These areas may see some of the heavier snows before it ends later on tonight. It's snowing in Dover and Salisbury. It's snowing all the way up into Trenton, New Jersey, and New York City and Hartford. You're under winter weather advisory for the evening hours as well. Some of the heavier snow is expected to occur right around the Cape and Martha's Vineyard, and here we're likely to see some very heavy wet snow, maybe about 4 to 8 inches of wet snow. So some of those power lines may be coming down later on tonight. Just be ready for power outages because not only the wet snow but the gusty winds. Otherwise, the snowfall shouldn't be too much of a problem. If you're heading into the office, though, in this region, give yourself some extra time tomorrow morning to make it on in. All right, that's what's happening in the east. What about the west, Christina?
Well, we have some very windy conditions for the east slopes of the Rockies. Let's take a look at what we're dealing with here. We've got an area of low pressure, but we also have an area of high pressure. And the difference between these two pressure areas is causing some very windy northerly and northwesterly winds here. We call that a pressure gradient, a tight pressure gradient. Indeed, that's what we're seeing. Again, winds out of the north and northwest here from Montana back into Colorado. Also some rather windy conditions on into the Dakotas and into Nebraska. But right in this area, we could see winds over 80 miles per hour with those wind gusts. We have some pretty windy conditions out there right now. You can see the winds are 30, 40 miles per hour. Around Denver, you've had winds gusting over 30 miles per hour. We've also got some snow on the ground from recent snows over the past several days. And because of that, because of the very windy conditions blowing the fluffy snow around, we have really significantly reduced visibilities and near blizzard conditions in some areas. So you want to look out as we head from Kansas, Nebraska, on into Colorado and Wyoming. Some very windy conditions indeed. You can see our area of low pressure swirling, an area of high pressure to the south and to the west, and again some snow falling underneath these clouds as well. But it's not so much the snow that's falling right now, although we are still getting some snow here, Colorado and on into Wyoming and through the Dakotas, but it's the snow that's already on the ground and the very windy conditions blowing that snow about. So we're not really going to see terribly significant accumulations, but we will definitely have some problems in the